What up, world? EstablishedRich coming right back at you. Almost 30 years after Tupac Shakur was shot in Las Vegas, Keefe D is finally sitting in front of a judge. And after listening to the prosecution open this case, I kept thinking the same thing. This man spent years helping them build the case against him with his own words. That is what makes this trial so crazy. We have heard 30 years of stories about that night, but now the stories are over. Somebody has to put evidence in front of a jury and prove that Keefe D was responsible for Tupac's death.
On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur came to Las Vegas to attend a Mike Tyson fight. After the fight, Tupac, along with Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and other people that were with that group, ran into a person named Orlando Anderson. And Orlando Anderson is the defendant's nephew. And when they encountered Orlando Anderson sitting by himself, they attacked him. And that attack was captured on video. Then, a few hours later, Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight drive down Flamingo Road to Club 662, where Tupac is scheduled to perform a concert. Then 2.5 hours later, after Tupac and Suge engaged in the beating of Orlando Anderson, they are gunned down. Tupac is gunned down in a drive-by shooting from a white Cadillac in an act of revenge. During those 2.5 hours, you will learn that the defendant was escalating and planning the retribution for the beating of his beloved nephew. Now, let's be clear. Dwayne Davis did not pull the trigger. But what he did do was plan the retaliation for the beating of his nephew. You will learn that Dwayne Davis got the gun. You will learn that he got into a white Cadillac. You will learn when the opportunity presented itself for retribution, Dwayne Davis made sure that the shooters were armed and ready to execute their revenge. And remarkably, you will learn that from Dwayne Davis himself.
The prosecution don't start this story with the white Cadillac. They take the jury back to the beef that was already brewing between people around death row and the Southside Compton Crips. Then September 7th, 1996 happens. Tupac sees Orlando Anderson in the MGM after the fight, runs over there, and we have all seen the security footage of Tupac jumping on him. And this is where everything changes, because Orlando wasn't just some random dude to Keefe D. That was his nephew. So now, according to the prosecution, this ain't just about somebody getting beat up. This is family, street pride, and reputation all mixed up together. And they say Keefe D was not about to let that go. Now think about how fast this escalated. Somebody gets jumped in a casino, and a few hours later, one of the biggest rap stars in the world is shot dead on the Las Vegas Strip.
Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was the leader of the Burris Street faction of the Southside Compton Crips. And while Suge Knight rose to prominence in his neighborhood due to the money that he was bringing in through the music industry, Dwayne Davis rose to prominence in his neighborhood because he was a very successful, large-scale drug trafficker. And you will learn that that is how one moves up in the world of gangs, by bringing in money to the neighborhood. The other thing you'll learn is that Orlando Baby Wayne Anderson was his nephew and also a highly respected member of the Southside Compton Crips. Now, as part of this case, you're going to hear another name, Eric Zip Martin. Now, Eric Zip Martin is not a member of the Southside Compton Crips. In fact, he's based out of New York. He's involved in the drug trade and knows Dwayne Davis as a result of both their involvements in the drug trade. Dwayne Davis from the West Coast, Eric Zip Martin from the East Coast. And one of the connections that Dwayne Davis gets through his association with Zip Martin is with Sean Puffy Combs, who was then the CEO of Bad Boy Entertainment. Sean Combs wanted some security when he came out to the West Coast. He was worried about Mob Piru. He was worried about the members of Death Row Records. And so Dwayne Keefe D. Davis agreed to be around to act as unofficial security for Sean Combs and his artists when they came out west.
This part helps explain why the prosecution wants the jury to understand the world these people were moving in. Keefe D was not just some fan who happened to cross paths with Tupac that night. He had his own street history, his own connections, and the prosecution brought up his relationship with Bad Boy. Whenever Sean Combs would come to California, Keefe D would have the Crips do security for him. And I think sometimes when people look back at the East Coast, West Coast beef, they remember the magazine covers, the disc records, and the award shows. But there were people around both sides who were not playing rap beef. Some of these dudes was living by street rules. So when Orlando gets jumped in front of everybody, the prosecution is saying Keefe D didn't look at that like my nephew lost a fight. They say he looked at it like something gonna get done about this.
So that brings us back up to September 7th, 1996, here in Las Vegas. Again, Mike Tyson is fighting Bruce Sullivan. He disposes of him in less than in a round. Doesn't take a full round. And then after the fight, Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, and the people that are here with, they leave. And among his group is Trayvon Lane. And that is why this fight occurs. Trayvon Lane and the Death Row group sees Orlando Anderson standing by himself, and they decide to attack him in retribution for what happened at the Lakewood Mall. You'll see Orlando Anderson's on the bottom of that group. You see security coming, trying to break this up. And then you'll see Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and that group exit the MGM Grand. Now, Orlando Anderson was by himself because when Dwayne Davis purchased the tickets for the Bruce Sullivan fight, he got them through a scalper. So everybody that came with Dwayne Davis were seated separately throughout the fight. And so Orlando Anderson was, at that time, by himself. You'll see that Mr. Shakur, Mr. Knight, and his group leave the MGM Grand. And you'll see that Orlando Anderson, after being held by security, is questioned for a bit, asked if he wants to press charges. He decides he doesn't want to participate in any type of prosecution and that he doesn't need medical attention. Dwayne Davis hears about this beating. And what you will hear is that in his world, there is no question that a response is required. And you will hear from Dwayne Davis what happens next.
This is where Keefe D's old interviews start becoming a problem for Keefe D today. Because the prosecution keeps walking the jury through that night using Keefe D's own words. He talked about getting in the car with the other guys. He has talked about the gun. He has talked about getting in that Cadillac and going looking for Tupac Shakur. That is what makes this case almost hard to believe. If the prosecution is right, Keefe D made it out of Vegas, made it through the original investigation, and year after year went by without him being charged for Tupac's death. Most people would look at that and say, you know what? I ain't never talking about this again. Not Keefe D. He kept talking. And that puts his defense in a wild position now. Because they have to explain why would Keefe D say all these things about himself if it wasn't true. Basically, they have to tell the jury that the old Keefe D was full of shit, but the current Keefe D is the one you should believe. Man, that's going to be a tough sell.
On the way back to the Las Vegas Strip, they see a caravan of cars. And that caravan included Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. And in that white Cadillac, before the shooting occurs, Dwayne Davis explains that the driver is Terrence T. Brown. In the rear driver's side is DeAndre Dre, or Big Dre Smith. In the rear passenger side is Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. And Dwayne Davis himself, KeeFD, is in the front passenger side. And this is how Dwayne Davis explains the murder of Tupac Shakur. So what you hear Dwayne Davis say, admit that as they see Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight driving to Club 662, Dwayne Davis, along with Terrence Brown, DeAndre Smith, and Orlando Anderson, decide to make a U-turn, confront Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. Dwayne Davis had the firearm. It's a firearm he got from Eric Von Zit Martin, and then he passes it to the back. Dwayne Davis says that if they were on his side, if Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight were on his side of the vehicle, he would have shot them himself. But because they were on the other side, he handed it to DeAndre Smith. DeAndre Smith, according to Dwayne Davis, did not want to shoot at that time, so Orlando Anderson shot into that car. Dwayne Davis explains this.
Now we get to the part everybody's been talking about since 1996. Tupac is riding with Suge Knight. A white Cadillac pulls up beside them and the night explodes. Shots come out of the car. Tupac gets hit multiple times. Suge is wounded. And 6 days later, Tupac Shakur dies.
Soren, and this is The Week in Rock. Trouble-plagued rapper and actor Tupac Shakur is dead at the age of 25, just about a week after sustaining 4 bullet wounds last Saturday night in Las Vegas.
Gangster rap singer Tupac Shakur died tonight in a Las Vegas hospital. The controversial MTV award winner who sold millions of records was on life support for the last 6 days.
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night after a brief life in a rough business. He was 25.
Every brother in here, please take your hat off. At 7:03 p.m. New York time, 4:03 p.m. Las Vegas time, Tupac Shakur passed away, y'all.
And one thing people need to understand about this trial is the prosecution is not saying Keefe D personally pulled the trigger. That's not what they have to prove. Their case is that he helped put the retaliation together, helped get the gun into that car, and was part of the group that went looking for Tupac after Orlando got jumped. So for the prosecution, the question is not just who fired the shots. The question is who helped make sure that car was there in the first place. And once again, they keep coming back to Keefe D's own words. This dude almost made it 30 years without sitting in front of a jury for this murder. Then spent part of those 30 years doing director's commentary on what happened that night. You gotta be dumb as hell.
Here.
One of the Keefe days, I was popping, Kingpin, drug dealer. I'm the only one alive. I've been pursuing me for 20 years. Newspapers, magazines. I'm coming out now to tell the story because I got cancer. I got nothing else to lose. All I care about now is the truth.
Dwayne Davis says, all I gotta do now is tell the truth. And in the 2017 public interview, he's a little evasive, but he admits to being the boss. He admits to being in the white Cadillac. And he admits to be part of the murder of Tupac Shakur. And when he says he's the only person that can tell what happened, he's right. Because by 2017, Terrence Brown is deceased. DeAndre Smith is deceased. Orlando Baby Lane Anderson is deceased. Terrence Brown was murdered in an unrelated incident. Orlando Anderson was murdered in an unrelated incident, and DeAndre Smith died from health issues. Remarkably, in 2019, Dwayne Davis then decides he's going to publish his own book. And with regards to the book, it is certainly a lot of self-aggrandizement. But again, the core remains. He was mad about Orlando Anderson the beating of Orlando Anderson, his nephew. He was in Las Vegas. He got the gun. He was in the white Cadillac, and he handed the gun to the sheriff. And what you'll notice is a constant thing that always goes through these statements is Dwayne Davis's visceral anger at Tupac Shakur for putting hands on his nephew. In the book, he says, them jumping on my nephew gave us the ultimate green light to do something to their heads. Then, Dwayne Davis decides that he's going to do public interviews regarding his role in the murder of Tupac Shakur.
So you ended up getting in the car with Baby Lane and them?
Yeah. Running the gym, went to the light on the sunset in Bingo, and dude would act like he was in parade or something. That nigga in that BMW hanging out with him, hey, it's Tupac, it's Tupac. And them bitches, shit, they was hollering for him. We had heard that motherfucker. They came up on the side of him.
This right here may be the most important part of the whole story to me. The prosecutors say the other men in that Cadillac died over the years, until eventually Keefe D was the last one left. Now put yourself in his head for a second. Years have passed. The case looks dead. Everybody else who was in the car is gone. And nobody has ever put handcuffs on you for Tupac's murder. At some point, it seems like Keefe stopped looking at this like an open murder case and started looking at it like it's his story to tell. So he does interviews, he talks about it in documentaries, then he writes a book and puts the story in print. That tells me he must have felt safe. Like, man, this shit happened so long ago, they can't touch me now. But murder don't expire just because you get comfortable. And that is the irony that makes this case different from almost any other homicide in hip-hop. The same story that made Keefe D interesting enough for people to interview him is now the same story that people are repeating in court. Think about that. You allegedly made it out clean, everybody else who was in the car is dead, and then you become the person keeping the damn story alive.
That is the visceral anger that Dwayne Davis had for Tupac Shakur. It did it in 2.5 hours. He took care of what he thought was the proper response. And 28 years later, he still is angry about what Tupac did. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur publicly, on camera, participated in a humiliating beating of Dwayne Davis's nephew, Orlando Anderson. And Dwayne Davis knew that in his world, that required a response. And over the years, in private interviews, in public statements, and even in private calls, Dwayne Davis has repeatedly told us over and over again about the anger he felt and his own role in the revenge drive-by shooting of Tupac Shakur. And now, nearly 30 years later, we're going to ask you to finally hold Dwayne Davis accountable. Thank you.
That is the prosecution's whole case when you strip everything away. They say Tupac jumped Keefe D's nephew. Keefe couldn't let that go. And a few hours later, he was part of a car full of niggas. And a few hours later, he was part of a car full of men riding around looking for Pop. And this is where 30 years of hip-hop history finally gets put to the side. It don't matter how many documentaries you watched. It doesn't matter how many times people say Orlando did it, somebody else did it, Puff had something to do with it, or somebody from Death Row set it up. Now you have a jury. And this jury has to deal with what actually can be proven. The prosecution is saying Keefe D helped organize revenge for his nephew and then spent years talking about his role in the murder. The defense is saying Keefe D was a storyteller. He exaggerated and lied about his role because talking about Tupac made people pay attention to him. And that is what makes this trial so interesting. The prosecution is basically saying, believe Keefe D. The defense is basically saying, please don't believe Keefe D. And Keefe D is sitting between both arguments. That is crazy. Because if this man was really lying all those years, he may have told one of the most expensive lies of his life. And if he was telling the truth, then he may have spent 30 years explaining a murder he thought he could never be arrested for. Either way, his own words are now sitting in that courtroom with him. And that is what I took from day one more than anything. Not the old East Coast, West Coast beef. Not all the conspiracy theories. Not even who the prosecution believes fired the gun. The craziest part is that Keefe D may have survived the ongoing investigation better than he survived his own need to talk about it. That would be like robbing a bank, getting away clean, then spending the next 20 years teaching classes on how you open a vault. At some point, somebody is going to start taking notes. And now they have. Tupac Shakur has been dead almost 30 years. For most of that time, people thought this case would never make it inside a courtroom. Now it has. And the man on trial may have helped put himself there, one interview, one book, and one documentary at a time. Now the question isn't whether Keefe D can tell a good story. The question is whether the jury believes it. But hey, that's just my opinion. What's yours? Like, comment, subscribe, Establish Rich. I'll be back with another one. Peace.